could go ahead and call our meeting to order, please. I could ask everyone to stand for a moment of silence, and then we'll ask Ms. Sames to lead us in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Shall we call the roll?
Mrs. Singer-Erdley?
Here.
Mr. Lesby?
Here.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell?
Here.
Mrs. Tingle Sames? Here. Mr. Showalter?
Here.
Mr. Stone?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett? Here. Mr. Thompson?
Here.
We have a quorum. We have a full house. Each of you should have a copy of the minutes from our last regularly scheduled meeting of March the 11th. If you'd like to take a moment to look those over for any possible corrections or additions.
Go ahead.
I make a motion.
Motion's been made for approval
I'll second it.
and seconded by Mr. Stone. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. Each of you should have received a copy of our latest check register in your packet. If you could indicate if you received that register. Thank you. Let's see. Bill, would you mind handing me the public sign-in sheet on the table outside the door? Thank you, sir. It's good to have a magistrate here to do official duties. There you go. Before we get to public comments, I would like to acknowledge our Judge Executive, Joe Pat Covington, is a guest in the room tonight. Judge, always glad to have you here. And we have multiple magistrates here, Mr. Burke, Mr. Livingston.
I just dropped kids off at practice and thought I had an hour and a half to kill, so.
Oh, well, thank you.
We feel the love.
We appreciate that high compliment, David. Okay, let's see. We have 3 people signed up for the public comment section. First is Mr. Keith Erdley.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to talk about the needle program that I believe has been is under consideration right now. Let me introduce myself. My name is Keith Erdley, and I've spent my professional career working in the criminal justice system, both as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor here in Scott County. And in my career, I've spent a lot of time, I've dealt with a lot of drug addicts, I've represented people charged with drug offenses, I've represented people who've committed crimes because of their addiction, and likewise as a prosecutor, I've prosecuted people in those same circumstances. So I've seen firsthand what the scourge of drugs does not only to people, not only to their families, but our communities as well. When people get hooked on drugs, they're not thinking clearly, they're not thinking rationally. They don't think about tomorrow, they don't think about next week. They're thinking about, how am I going to get my next fixed? And that's what's driving their behavior. They're not thinking rationally, and it destroys their lives. They don't work, they don't do what they need to do, they don't take care of themselves, they don't take care of their families, they don't pay child support, and then some even turn to crime to feed their addiction. It's a horrible thing. These people who are addicted to drugs deserve our sympathy, and we should be sympathetic with their plight. The drugs are so addictive and so powerful, they take over, and the people don't think rationally. And we should do what we can within our means and our ability to help people break this addiction. I'm all in favor of funding for drug treatment centers. I'm all in favor of drug education. I think that's a wonderful thing to let children know, hey, don't be enticed by this. This is so dangerous. Once you get hooked, it's going to take over. This is where we should be spending our money. This is where we should be spending our resources. We should not be spending our money to enable addicts to feed their habit. That's not where our money should be. That's not where our focus should be. It's my experience that the addicts aren't thinking about the future. They're just thinking about their next fix. And when we're giving them needles, what we're doing it, we're making it that much easier for them to feed their habit and to continue in the behavior that's destroying not only their lives, but the lives around them. It's come to my attention, my wife Polly's on the council, and she's told me some of the specifics of how this program works. I understand someone can come in and get a needle and not show an ID. I understand the anonymity, why that would be. But I also understand that someone could come in, a juvenile, a 15-year-old, could come in and say, hey, I'm 19, I'd like a needle, please. And if that's true, what we are doing, we are passing out the means for children to do drugs. And we're spending our money to do this. We're doing this as a society. This is a horrible thing. To enable children to ingest this poison. You know, what's going to happen if this is passed? Sooner or later, someone is going to OD, shooting up on drugs using one of the needles that we gave them. It's going to happen. And then their parents are going to come down here, their family's going to come down here, and they're going to say, why did you do this? Why did you make it easier for my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, my child to do drugs? Why did you make it easier for them? I'm also concerned you're going to have a pregnant woman come to the center, maybe an underage pregnant woman come to the center and ask for a needle, and they're going to give it to her. And she's going to shoot up, putting the poison not only in her own body, but in the body of her unborn child. I think this is horrific. I think as a society, we should spend our money to fight drug use. I'm all for rehabilitation. I'm all for education. I'm all for treatment. But to make it easier for addicts to get their next fix is a bad idea, and I am strongly opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eardley. Mr. Paul Buda.
Members of the City Council, I emailed you with specific questions that I hope will be answered tonight. My name's Paul Buda. I want you to know that I'm here because there was some information passed last time that I was confused about. And so I'm here tonight, not only as Paul Buda, and I told you last time I'm a law enforcement officer, but I'm also the authorized representative to speak on behalf of the Royal Springs Lodge of the Fraternal Order of Police, which covers our officers from Scott County and Georgetown Police Department. And I could tell you this much, that the men and women that work in law enforcement do not support this. And that's what they told me to come here tonight and tell you. And I'm telling you in no uncertain term, because last time it seemed like the Georgetown Police Department and Scott County Sheriff's Department supported this measure. They do not. Okay? And let's make that absolutely clear. The men and women that work in law enforcement do not support this provision. Ms. Miller last time said that, she was in touch with the medical community, and, as a law enforcement officer, I'm in touch with the medical community in maybe different ways, but I deal with the first responders, the firemen, the doctors and nurses that work in the ERs. And since the last meeting, I've queried a lot of those individuals, and their answer is the same. No, it's a bad idea. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. There's second and third order effects. The doctors and nurses that I spoke to that work in the ER, they said one of the consequences is a rise in aneurysms from drug overdoses. There's medical treatment that goes beyond what we think about. When I asked you the questions, when I sent you those questions earlier, I said the big question we have to answer is, will the policy in question reduce illegal drug use or reduce harm? And I laid out pretty easily 6 or 7 questions that spelled it out clearly. And if you look at those objectively without emotion and let your intellect rule, you're going to see the answer is no. Using a common sense approach, we are encouraging drug use. And that's an unacceptable thing for our community. There's no metrics for this program. No metrics. In any form of business that you go to, there's metrics. I mean, you can't walk in, at least I can't walk into my supervisor and say, you know what? I need $200,000 for new boats. Well, Paul, why do you need $200,000 for new boats? Well, I just need it. Well, can you show me why? No, I can't show you why. You just have to trust me that I need this, right? There's no metrics on what is tracked, because the data that is tracked is meaningless data. The proposed reasoning behind this is to prevent drug transmission of disease, hepatitis and HIV. We don't track it. We don't track the people that have it. We don't track the diseases. We don't know how much is passed, if it's stopped. We can't quantify any of these metrics. So if you can't quantify the metrics, there's another reason then, or another purpose behind this program, because the data is not there to support whether the program works, whether the program fails. We were told that by people coming in and getting needles, that's a sign that we will accept as success that the program is working. If our program's purpose is just to distribute needles, I would agree that's a sign of success. If it's to stop the spread of HIV or hepatitis, I would argue that without metrics, you can't tell me whether it's stopped or not. However, by implementing the program, it's going to make it very hard for us to put a sunset provision in, because the argument is going to be, well, the program's working because people are coming in and availing themselves to it. We don't know if it's working, but that's going to be the argument that's made. Who's the program going to serve? Well, we don't know, because we don't take IDs. All you have to say is from Scott County, but you don't have to prove it, okay? The big issue I have is no IDs, no way to track, no data collection, no database that's going to be served. So we don't know who's coming and going. We don't know what's going to happen with all these needles. I can tell you this much. Our county prisoners are picking up on average 3 needles a day on the streets. That doesn't seem like much, but we haven't flooded the streets yet. But what's our responsibility to those people once they start getting stuck by government-issued needles? I think that there's going to be liability and exposure to the city of Georgetown, because when you're an innocent person that's involved in these transactions that are authorized by the government, provided by the government can't wash its hands and say, we have no responsibility for the consequences of our actions. We don't have, at least I didn't hear any of the time we were speaking last time, any means of cleaning up this biohazard waste. Now, when you go to the doctor's office, think about this. What color is a sharps container? What does it say on a sharps container? They're red, they're predominantly and prominently displayed, and they say biohazardous waste. So now we're creating biohazardous waste that this board is going to accept to be dumped on our streets. Ms. Miller said 42%. The judge executive said 90% of the needles are going to be picked up. I'm going to go more with what Ms. Miller said, 42%. That means 48% of the needles are going to be on the streets. Now, she gave a number last time of about 5,000 needles were passed out in one of the other counties. So if you do 42% of 5,000, that's going to put about 3,800 needles on our streets per year. That's a lot of needles to pick up. Who's going to be responsible? Who do we call? Do we call the police? Is that a burden we're going to put on our law enforcement officers? Do we call EMS? You know, what's the expense to the community for this? We talked about Narcan, you know, and we talked about things that we see in law enforcement. They have Narcan parties now. Do you all know what a Narcan party is? Does anybody know what a Narcan party is?
Yes, Mr. Booter, we're aware of these things. If you could go ahead and conclude your point, please.
Sure.
Actually, I don't know what it is.
I don't know what one is either. I've never heard of
Yeah, I was shaking my head
it.
no, because I don't know. That's why I think he's going on.
A Narcan,
Please explain it to the ladies.
A Narcan party is where illegal drug users get together and they take these drugs, and the first person that dies, they administer the Narcan to revive them. And that's the goal of the party. Okay? Is this the type of
Get
behavior?
them to overdose so
Yes.
they can do the Narcan. Oh, wow.
And be revived. Is this what we want from our community? So my question for the members are tonight is, please answer the 15 questions that I asked you. Please consider the liability exposure, and please provide a roadmap on how we're going to handle this problem. You know, just implementing this without a viable solution is, you know, negligent. You know, we have to have a means to collect and destroy this material. It's biohazardous waste. We can't leave it on the streets. So if the council is planning on implementing this, have a means and method to cure the problem that we've created. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will comment that both, Mr. Buda, both our police department's leadership and the leader of our hospital medical community are each in favor of the needle exchange program, contrary to your statement. Is Miss Teresa Buda here?
All I really had to comment on is that we do live in the North End, and we have a lot of drug traffic there, and we have been victimized by people breaking into our cars, stealing the change out of our cars. I have a soft top Jeep. They cut the tops to get in to take the money out. They break our fences to get into our property. And I've noticed that people are changing their porch lights from white to blue. And the reason why they do that is because if you change your lights from white to blue, it makes it harder for people to find a vein. And that's an increase in drug activity in a neighborhood. And that's, that's my neighborhood. And, most of you don't live in that type of neighborhood. And that's an increase in drug activity. Now, the needle exchange program is going to increase the number of needles. That's in addition to the needles that are already there. It's not replacing the needles. And, this is just, this is not, you can't, like you said, Mayor Prather, you cannot prove a negative. So we can't determine whether or not this is going to decrease AIDS and HIV. We can't determine whether or not this is going to decrease overdoses or aneurysms or decrease the, use of IV, drugs or, decrease, opioid use. We don't know if this is ever going to change. Once this is put into effect, we're never going to get rid of it. Ms. Miller said, if people are using this program, we know it's successful. So once you put this in place, we are never going to get rid of it because that's how we determine its success. There's no data that we can collect that's going to determine whether we are reducing HIV and hepatitis. And so what is the purpose of this program? And we could have an explosion of AIDS and hepatitis, and we'll never get rid of the program. This is just a colossally bad idea, and we should not do this.
Thank you, Ms. Buda. Mr. Burke, did you wish to speak? You may.
There's good information, there's bad information, and there's misinformation. I had a mea culpa last year, and I was really not very fond of the syringe exchange program. And that's what it is. It's a syringe exchange program. It's not a needle exchange program. And it's written after the Kentucky Harm Reduction and Syringe Exchange Program guidelines that were issued by the state of Kentucky. It's hard to get stuck on a syringe with a retractable needle, okay? It can't happen. Once it's used, the needle retracts, you can't get stuck. That's what makes it safer. Scott County has had 3 of our ambulance people stuck in the past 12 months. Those are very expensive workers' comp claims. There's a couple numbers I'd like to leave you with. 63,848. 63 million is what the state of Kentucky paid in Medicare expenses to treat 800 people who were infected with hepatitis C in 2017, 2018. 48. If we issue 40 syringes a month to an addict who is in the program looking for help, and if the syringes are 10 cents each, that's $4 a month. Times 12 is $48. If you have 10 addicts, that's 480. If you have 30, it's 1,500. The city of Georgetown spends more than that on envelopes in a given year. So it's chump change. It really is. Okay. I came out in favor of the program. I took what the magistrates said they didn't like about it, and David Livingston and I tried to address those. And yes, we were guilty of collusion. We talked with Dr. Miller, and we said, can you do this? And there were some things she couldn't do, and some things she could do, and some things she suggested. One of the things that the magistrates didn't like was they didn't like the idea there was no age limit. So we put an 18-year age limit on it. They didn't like the number of syringes, so we reduced it a little bit. They didn't like the fact that there was no out, okay? And an out is if you pass a resolution, they run forever. Scott County did not pass a resolution. We passed an ordinance. An ordinance has a force of law. And in that ordinance, we wrote that this would be reviewed every 6 months. And as long as it was successful, as long as it was meeting its intended goals, we would continue to endorse it. If there came a time it was not meeting its intended goals, we would withdraw our support and kill the program. So $1,500 to treat 30 addicts, $2,000 to treat 40, $2,500 to treat 50. It's not a lot of money. These things, I find them laying on the ground. I own a security company in Lexington. 98% of my employees work from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And we see these things laying on the ground. And we pick them up. And we turn them into the health department. Yes, there are such things as Narcan parties. And these are where a group of heroin addicts will get together and they'll all put the Narcan inhalers in a basket. And if any of them start turning blue, one of them will revive the others. Okay? Yeah, it's not a perfect situation, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to stop the flow of drugs. We're not here to keep people from becoming addicts. This program is called the Kentucky Harm Reduction Syringe Exchange Program. It has one goal in mind and one goal only. That's to stop or slow the spread of HIV and hepatitis C. Hepatitis C can live in a drop of blood for up to 3 days on the doorknob in the bathroom at Cracker Barrel. And you'll never know it, okay? It can live for 3 days in the barrel of a syringe that doesn't have a retractable needle. So the next person uses it gets hepatitis C. So let's take all the witchcraft and voodoo out of this, and let's look at the facts of the program. 20 years ago, when HIV was running rampant through the gay community, we passed out condoms like popcorn. We didn't degrade people because they were gay. We didn't degrade people because of their lifestyle. We didn't say, if I give you a condom, are you going to stop? Okay? We did it to prevent the spread of disease. There is no difference than what we're trying to do today. If you have any questions, you all have my email address. You've got my phone number. Give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And there will be, council has noticed that there's, later in the meeting, there's both a presentation from Dr. Miller to answer some of the questions that council has raised previously. And then after Dr. Miller's presentation is scheduled a first reading of the Syringe Exchange Program ordinance. And for the audience's benefit, City Council does not vote on first reading of the ordinance. We vote only on second reading of the ordinance. So for those that would like to stick around for just a few minutes, there'll be much more conversation on this topic just a few minutes into the agenda. Under Mayor's comments, just a couple of things to let the council know that there is another scheduled cleanup of the old Georgetown Cemetery on North Hamilton Street on April the 6th for anyone that would like to participate in that cleanup of the old Georgetown Cemetery. We have also scheduled the annual Main Street Clean Sweep where we focus on trying to clean up downtown. and that is scheduled for April the 24th. We'll be working downtown that day from 11 to 1, just on the downtown cleanup. Between now and then, we hope to announce some other cleanup activities that will be done in concert with the Main Street Clean Sweep. And that is the only mayor's comments that I had this evening. Under item 7 on your agenda, Parks and Recreation has approval of 2 grant applications. One is for an application for recycled crumb rubber mulch that'll go in the Kendall and Friends
It's
playground.
actually not mulch, it's a pour-in-place surfacing. It used to be that the grant was called crumb rubber mulch, but now they've added this component to the grant applications.
Okay, good, and it's a 75-25
That is correct.
split.
Yes.
And that amount's listed in your council packet. They've also asked to reapply for a land and water conservation grant that would also be used for the parking lot for the Kendall and Friends thing. I thought the numbers worked out just about perfectly. It's a 50-50 percentage split, and it's a $50,000 split on the Kendall and Friends. So those are both require council approval to apply, since they require council match.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any questions?
Is that for both of these?
For both.
That's for both.
Sure.
If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, and good luck.
I didn't even have to talk. That was easy.
You're welcome. Chase?
Good evening. Georgetown Municipal has 3 purchase orders and 1 new business item for council consideration tonight. The purchase orders, all 3 of them are for use at wastewater treatment plant 2, so those are pass-through costs to Toyota Manufacturing. I'll run through those real quick if you'll allow me. Item A and C are both, A is the labor and C is the equipment to replace our HVAC unit at one of our structures. It does have temperature sensitive equipment within. The HVAC unit is a sole source award because we're just replacing the existing unit, so we don't have to have it redesigned. And then the labor was, we received 3 quotes for that, with Faust Electric being the lowest and also a trusted contractor. And the equipment being air mechanical sales. The item B is Evoqua water technology. That's just a quarterly purchase we make for carbon resin, and that's part of our treatment process and material that we need for filtration. So
You will go ahead and take those 3, Chase?
Yes, sir.
They're different than,
unless you have any questions, but
Motion
for your
made.
consideration.
okay, that's
Second.
A, B, C?
Yes, please.
Okay, and that's been seconded. Time. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then your letter of credit, line of credit.
Yes, sir. We're asking for council consideration of a line of credit for $6 million at a fixed interest rate of 2.61%. Currently, with our wastewater treatment plant, we're starting design and we'll go into construction. We're exploring all options on how we will fund both of those, the design and the construction. We would like to establish this line of credit for use only on the design and construction. We currently, within our this year's fiscal year's budget, we have $1 million budgeted for the design. We won't spend all that. And as we move through the entire design process over the next year and a half, and then the construction process out into 2023, we will budget that money. This line of credit is simply to give us some options with when we go out to either KIA funding or the bond market for the construction portion. Just gives us the flexibility to push off going to the bond market to self-fund this project. We don't know if we're going to use it yet or not, whether we will borrow $1 against it. We just need it as an option. So if you do have any questions on us executing this line of credit, our finance director is here to help me answer any questions you have. But Again, that's solely for the wastewater treatment plant design and construction.
Just an interim financing tool.
Yes, sir.
David and I were comparing notes before the meeting, and it's really well priced,
Yes, sir.
frankly. Are there any questions for Chase? If not, a motion for approval.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else for us tonight, Chase?
That's it.
Ms. Scotts, thank you.
Thank you.
Under city attorney, as promised, it didn't take us long to come back to the syringe exchange program. Dr. Miller, Dr. Crystal Miller is here with us to do a presentation and answer some questions that the council may have had. And then we will proceed with first reading.
I would like to say something.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
had a thing on it. We're the city council form of government. We're not city commissioners. We have you addressed us as city, Connie Tackett, city commissioner, Chuck Bradley, city commissioner. We're the city council form of government.
Those were the people that were actually on that committee that did the.
I know, but Ms. Tackett's a city
Okay.
council member. She's not
Sorry
a city
for that
commissioner.
mistake.
So I'm just clarifying that because it's on.
I can change that.
document, so.
So I appreciate the public health interest. If this has done anything, this program has brought public health to the forefront. And I have often said that if this would have been labeled in the legislature as a harm reduction program instead of a syringe exchange program, this would not have been as politically charged. If you think about it, we do harm reduction every day in our life. When we get in our cars, we put a seatbelt on. That's because data shows that when you're in a car wreck, you're less likely to get hurt or die. Same for bike helmets, same for flu vaccines, same for restaurant inspections. We do restaurant inspections to protect the community. I think the city council has also passed a smoking ordinance for the city. That's a harm reduction policy that you all have passed. And we don't always think of them in those ways, but those are public health issues and things that we do every day in public health. So I've labeled this harm reduction syringe exchange program because that really should have been the language. It's harm reduction. So I want to talk about the purpose of a syringe exchange because obviously there's very polarized opinions about a syringe exchange program, and people feel very differently about them based on their personal experience or what they've read. But the purpose of a syringe exchange program is to reduce the spread of a bloodborne disease among intravenous drug users, and that's a best practice in harm reduction that has shown to be a best practice in the public health community. It's also a community safety issue. So, can you see that?
We were
It's
talking
so
about maybe
glary, the lights are right in the middle of
maybe
the.
Turn lights off.
light off over there. Yeah, that may.
Next one.
No, next.
There.
Yeah.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
Can you
much better.
see?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't.
So when we talk about reducing the spread of disease, we think about that from two standpoints in our syringe exchange program. Both for the participant comes in, we give them syringes and we educate them on how to safely do what they're doing. But we also educate them on what to do out in the community. If you see syringes, what we expect you to do as a participant in our program. So this is twofold for us. It's both about the participant and it's about the community. We also highly encourage testing. We cannot mandate that, but we highly encourage testing. We educate them based on the assessment that we do, and we link them up to resources if that's available, and then ultimately protect the community. So why are we focused on Hep C and HIV? Hep C is very dangerous. As Bill Burke stole my thunder, it lives outside the body, and there's varying research on how long it lives outside the body, but it lives outside the body. It has a very high viral load, which means if you get stuck with a needle and it has Hep C on it, you are going to have Hep C. It's also a silent disease. So up until the legislature passed these syringe exchange programs, most of the hepatitis C cases that we found in the medical community they had been around for a long time, and by the time we got a hold of them, they were chronic, which means they had cirrhosis of the liver. A high transmission rate, primarily through IV drug use, and they're very costly to treat. For HIV, it doesn't live outside the body. It is key that we have early detection. This program does that, and I'll show you a slide later that I think will prove that to you. The transmission is through bodily fluids, so sex, IV drug use, and then mothers can pass it to baby during delivery. And it's extremely costly to treat. So I want to approach this from an economic standpoint. The estimated lifetime cost is $400,000 to $600,000 for HIV. The estimated lifetime cost for hepatitis C is $100,000. Kentucky Medicaid spent $50 million healthcare dollars on 1,000 Hep C cases in 2014. That's what got us interested in the legislation to pass this program. Think about that, $50 million on 1,000 cases. This is probably really small for you. There's a TV right there. You can. So this is national data from CDC. This is the U.S. disease burden rate. So if you look at the small blue line on the very bottom, from 2012 to 2016, there were less than 3,000 cases reported nationwide of Hep C. CDC now has statistical analysis, and they are able to calculate what it should have been during those years. So what it should have been is the pink. In 2012, 24,000. In 2016, 41,000. So let's just look at this from a standpoint of 2016, which is the most relevant data. So 3,000 cases of Hep C that were actually reported, $100,000, that's $300 million of our healthcare dollars spent on a disease that is preventable.
Can you say that one more time? I apologize. On the 3,000?
Uh-huh. So does this have a laser on it? Maybe? No. So right here, 2016, there were about 3,000 cases reported. That's what was actually reported nationwide. The one in the pink, 41,000, is CDC said that based on their statistical calculations, that's what should have been reported if we were accurately testing. And that's a $4 billion cost. So this is not only a healthcare issue, this is an economic issue. If we look at HIV in the nation, we have 1.1 million people living in this nation with HIV. So we can do those costs, 1.1 times $400,000, and you can do the math. So when we break it down to a state level, so just some key points about this. The states in the red are basically greater than 50% increase in Hep C cases. So Kentucky's rates doubled between 2010 and 2013 of Hep C. In 2017, Kentucky ranked in the top in the nation for Hep C cases. We now have more than 38,000 Kentuckians living with Hep C, and we have approximately 6,600 living with HIV. So we talked about local data at the last meeting, and this is the best we've got. HIV is considered a state disease, so this is state data, and the latest I could get was 2017. We have living with HIV in Scott County, we have 46 cases. If you do the math on that and you're on the conservative side, the $400,000, it's $18 million in healthcare costs for 46 cases of HIV to treat. Hep C, I want you to look at this from 2015 prior, look at our rates, 87, 70, and 57. That was prior to the legislation that was passed in 2015, making the point that this was not on our radar and we were not testing for this. Started in 2016, you can look, our cases start increasing. In 2016, there was 81, and this is strictly out of Georgetown Emergency Department. This is not anywhere else in Georgetown that we're testing for because we don't have it. And I also need to note that I talked to the emergency director, and he confirmed that they are not testing everyone that comes through their doors. You have to fall out in a screener. So if I'm using drugs and I go in there for my broken elbow, I may not tell them I'm using drugs because I want them to give me something, right, for my pain. So if you look at 2016, we have 81 cases. That doubled. In 2017, we have 154 cases. In 2018, we had 326. So we are basically doubling every year. You multiply just the 2018 data, 326 cases times 100,000, you're looking at 32 million healthcare dollars. Also in 2018, we had 351 new cases of HIV in Kentucky. So let's look beyond the needle, because we tend to get hung up on the fact that we're handing out syringes. And I understand that's a radical concept. It's in the public health world, this is not something new, but it has been new for Kentucky since 2015. But I want to look at this in two different ways. Let's look at this from the patient standpoint, and then we'll look at it from the community standpoint. So for the patient, when a patient comes into us, likely, most of the time, this is they're in their stages of change, and this is one of the most responsible decisions they've made. They are entering into some type of medical treatment where they come into us and they are willing to open up to us and tell us about their story on some level. They come in, we talk to them, they complete an assessment with us, we go through and gather lots of data on them. We ask them many questions. We offer them HIV and hepatitis C testing. Lots of times they don't take us up on that. I can tell you, in going through the harm reduction training myself, I had to test myself for Hep C. It's scary, and I knew I didn't have it, but it's scary to sit there and watch that thing for 20 minutes. It's unnerving. So that takes us building a relationship with them many times. But what we do is on their initial assessment, based on what they tell us on that initial assessment, that's what drives our education for them. So if they tell us they're using some type of drug, we'll talk to them about their overdose rates. If they tell us, I'm doing cocaine, but I'm having multiple sex partners, then we'll educate them on safe sex. We at every point that we can intercept them with education, we do. We also do overdose prevention. Right now, we've got Narcan that we're able to hand out in Harrison County just because we got a grant to fund it. That's not part of our program, but we're constantly looking for grants, and we've right now got Narcan, and who better to have Narcan than people who are using drugs with other people? Because I have Narcan on me, but I'm never around people that do drugs, rarely. So it doesn't do me good to have it. We try to get it in the hands of people who are going to be around this population. We link them to other healthcare services as many times as we can. And oftentimes this is the only care that they are receiving. But for the community standpoint, if you don't even look at the patient, this program protects our public works, our fire, our police, our EMS. As Mr. Burke said earlier, 3 county employees got stuck last year. 30% of law enforcement officers report that they've had a needle stick within their career. This is about community safety, and it also saves us tax dollars. It's both a healthcare issue as well as an economic issue. So this slide right here is, I say, should be the poster child for needle exchange programs. I was lucky enough to get my hands on this. I was in Washington a couple weeks ago, and I actually had time with the CDC director, Dr. Redfield, and he's an interesting man because he's been a physician for 60 years, but he also almost lost a son to the opioid abuse issue. And he said, I thought I knew everything. For 60 years, I told patients what to do. I told them anything they needed to know. This is who you need to talk to. And he said, not until it was my son did I realize the struggles of trying to navigate the system. He said, I couldn't do it. It's complex, it's hard, and he said I had every means of resource that I needed behind me to make that happen, and I still couldn't do it. But anyway, back to the data. If you can see that, the first line says 15%. So 15% of people with HIV, the status of care is in the middle, and it says didn't know they had HIV. 15% of people with HIV didn't know they had HIV, and they infected almost 40% of the new cases that we have. So think about that. 15% of 1.1 million people do not know they have HIV, and they infected 40% of our new cases. 40% of 40,000 new cases a year. And then if you go to the bottom one says 51% of people who knew they had HIV and were taking they were virally suppressed. They had been linked up to care in some way. They were virally suppressed. 0 transmission. And this right here proves that we've got to get on the front end of this. We've got to start testing. We've got to have a mandatory site for testing. And anybody that walks through our doors, that's what we offer. There's no other place in Georgetown that does that. So funding. Dr. Redfield also shared with me that the president has put over $600 million in his budget to address the opioid epidemic. A portion of those funds are going to come to Kentucky. You know why? Because Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia we've been hit the hardest with this. And it's going to come in the form of treatment It's going to come in the form of SEPs. It's not just blanket $600 million, but Kentucky will get a portion of that. And I'm telling you that what's happening for us right now in our state is that the communities that have SEPs are the first ones getting this funding. That's what's happening. And with that, with an SEP, we identify populations, we diagnose people, which is what we need, we link them to care, we educate them, and we continue to develop strategies to protect the community. Let me give you an example of how we've developed a strategy already here before we even passed this. Chief Bossy came and Officer Lair came to our needle exchange program. And he was educated on the risk to his officers. And so we're setting up right now for my infectious disease coordinator to go and do training with his officers. That's community safety. That partnership would have never happened. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this is the map of all the syringe exchange programs in Kentucky. There's over 50 of them, and I will point out that Scott County is right in the middle of all of that cluster. We are the donut hole, so either everybody else is doing something real right and we're not on board, or the opposite. I can tell you that we collect a lot of data in our syringe exchange program. I don't know the comments that were made earlier about not having data. We collect lots of data, and we do community reports. They're on our website. You can view those at any time. We do them by month, and we do them by calendar year. We use retractable syringes. You are required to have a one-to-one exchange at your third time, and the 40% rate of return needles was actually the first year. It takes about 3 years to get to the 90% rate. We are right now seeing we're at a little over 90% in our Harrison County needle exchange program, but it takes you a while to get there because people in the very beginning, a lot of times they'll come one time and never come back. So your exchange rate is really off until you establish participants.
Was that your last slide, Dr. Miller?
Yes, it was.
Chief, would you turn the lights on, and that way we can see each other again?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Dr. Miller, thank you for that presentation, and I'd like to open it up to questions from the council now. Yes.
All right. I'm kind of an anomaly in this. They've been here for a long time. You have florists, members of the public institutions, banking, Walmart. I was a police officer. I'm glad Chief Bossy stepped up and getting his people training. That's very important, okay? But I have a question, and I've dealt with this. Somebody dies, one of your needles, explain how they cannot come back on the city of Georgetown and Scott County.
City of Georgetown is passing this. The funding comes from the public health funds, but
We passed it, and we allowed it. How do they not come back on us and hold us liable?
I don't know that that's ever happened. I would have to check into that. I don't have that answer.
Yeah, because, and another thing that there's a few back here. Explain that, Mr. Burke.
You know, the city is probably going to pass a resolution adopting a harm reduction syringe exchange program. Scott County passed the ordinance.
I agree.
So we're the holder of it.
Yeah, but we will be on that line with you all, okay? And we will be just as open to a lawsuit as you all were.
Let me assist here. A heroin addict will open their veins and put heroin in with a soup spoon if they have to. They'll blow it in with a straw from McDonald's. You don't have to inject, you can smoke heroin. So if someone's gonna OD, they're gonna OD anyway. Whether they're using a syringe with a retractable needle or a regular syringe they found at the local vet in their garbage.
That's not what I'm getting at. That's not what I'm getting at.
What you're getting at is how are you on the hook for a syringe that the health department provided?
Yes.
Okay, Wedco has their own liability. They
Okay,
have their own liability insurance.
but we passed it, you passed it.
That's right.
We're still
That's
in
right.
that hook.
Because we're required by the state to pass it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Are you ready to be sued?
If it needs to be, yes.
I've been there,
Yeah.
okay? I've stood at Lemons Mill and Bypass when an addict, a methamphetamine addict, hit and killed someone in his own car. I had to go explain to family members with the coroner that an addict killed their family. Okay?
And you do the same thing for drunk drivers too.
Yeah, exactly. But
Alcohol's legal and drugs.
I've had a relative die from alcohol abuse. I've had a family member die from drugs. Okay? It's nothing new to me. I've dealt with it.
That's not
Okay?
new to me either.
But
I had
what I'm
12,000
getting
soldiers
at,
on active duty. You don't have 12,000 soldiers and not have
I
issues.
wholeheartedly agree with you. Wholeheartedly agree with you. But what I'm getting at is we're talking about harm reduction. Police officers, they're getting training. Firefighters are getting training. And ambulance workers are getting training. Public Works is getting training. But still, it's passing out needles. And if they are retractable, they can be defeated. Everything can be defeated. Yes, sir. Don't shake your head. No, they can be.
I'll tell you what, I'll get you one, see if you can defeat it.
Mr. Buddha, I'll pass that one to you because it can.
I have a
It
question,
can.
Dr.
Go ahead.
Brown. In the 3 years that you've established the needle exchange or syringe exchange in Harrison County, have you had any reported ODs from the use of your needles?
We keep up with reported ODs. We work with police and EMS, but we don't identify whether they are
Your
using
needle
it.
or not? So there's not really any.
But that's not completely accurate because I came to your site and talked to the young lady that was in charge of your program. She's a very nice young lady and very, very informative. One of the questions I asked her directly was, how many people has been through the program and that she knows, because as you all know, I'm hung up on the drug side of it. I'm hung up on shooting up. I'm hung up on syringes. You know that. And she said, I said, how many people have come through your program, you've had it 3 years now, have come through and are clean and sober now? She couldn't give me a number.
We don't track that. That's not what
So
this is
I
about.
asked her how many people that she knows of that have been through her program and have died of an overdose. I didn't ask directly about the needle, but I asked her if she died of an overdose. And she said at least 4 that she knew of.
That's right.
4 died of an overdose?
That's right.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
People overdose. That's why we're here.
Yes. No, that's not why you're here.
No, that's not why
that's
you're
not why
here, for
you're
health
here.
reasons,
You
no.
told us the last
You're not
meeting
here
that
for
you
that.
were here for the.
But if people didn't do
disease
drugs,
of
we
it.
wouldn't be here talking about this issue, is my point. I can tell you the opposite of that is, there are lots of lawsuits going on with the hepatitis A outbreak with the Commissioner Howard in Frankfurt. So on the flip side of that is, if this community doesn't respond and we're seeing a spike in HIV and Hep C, there's also a liability there. The legislation has required the county and city to pass this legislation along with our boards of health.
Now, let me ask you this, because this is your program. Where does enforcement step in? I know this is harm reduction, okay, but where does enforcement step in?
I mean, in terms of arrests, law enforcement?
No, not what I'm getting.
Enforcement of what?
Enforcement of the laws, okay? Because there are drug laws, okay? If you're trying to help these people, okay, where are we going with the people that are supplying? Okay? With one, you've got to have the other. And, Mayor, I would love to add an enforcement section into this to say where we can pick up police officers to specifically help this program and go after the people that are supplying the drugs on the streets of Georgetown.
Yeah, Todd, I think every day we go after the people supplying drugs.
Absolutely.
On the street in Georgetown. I think we do that with or without this program. I don't think that has any impact on the way we police this. Crystal can't answer legal liability
I
type.
agree.
But if we're
And-
asked to vote on it, we need those kind of answers.
If I could finish this. I can't answer the legal liability question, but I can tell you that these exact harm reduction programs have been used in other states for more than a decade. So I would assume in that period of time that legal questions have come up, and there are probably answers to those. I'm going to guess after harm reduction programs in multiple cities across Kentucky and all over America, that we're probably not going to be the first to have to answer that liability question. Others that are better qualified than I can give you a better answer, Todd, but I don't think that that liability question is a stopper. So for me, the figure that really drives a lot of this stuff is that the Centers for Disease Control, and this is something that Judge Covington and I have talked about at length. It's a really important statistic. People that go to needle exchange programs are 5 times more likely to seek treatment.
And if that's something that you're interested in, I'd be glad to do a little bit of research on how other programs have faced that. I mean, it's a reality. When you're a government entity, you open yourself to lawsuit for myriad things. I mean, it's a
And
reality. But
I've been on the bad side of a lawsuit, so and that's
We probably have 20
Exactly.
major lawsuits
Exactly.
in
And
process
it's-
right now, Todd, so it's not something that we're not used to.
It's nothing, nothing nice
But
when
this
you
is
open a
something
letter and it says,
Being asked to vote
pay
on.
us or we're gonna sue, so, yeah.
Before David Livingston speaks, could I address
Yeah,
a
I'd
couple
like
of
to get all
issues,
the
please?
council questions out first.
Well, one
I
thing
just wanted to
that-
address the liability issue, is what I
Okay.
wanted to address.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say, Kentucky League of Cities and Kentucky Association of Counties are both well aware of the legislation that was passed. So therefore, if there were any issues from a liability aspect, they would have been there lobbying on behalf of cities and counties before it was passed, to make sure that the liability issue was taken away. I've never heard KLC or KCO say anything about any liability issues, and honestly, I don't believe there's any case law in Kentucky at this point in time for a scenario of what you're talking about.
But, and I agree with Devin, it's something that I would want, I
But
would want to
if
look
there's
for
no
other states
case law,
too.
if there's no case law,
In
you
the state
can't
of
say.
Kentucky.
There's probably
But I'm
other
talking other
states.
states, though.
Well, but other states are going to have different statutes. So what happens in another state can't always be applied to the state of Kentucky. Because at that point in time, you're looking at Department of Insurance rules and regulations and KAR. You're also looking at KRS. So there are a lot of things that come into it that will play factor in the state of Kentucky that will not play factor anywhere else. So you can't just compare Indiana to Kentucky or Tennessee to Kentucky because the laws, you can't even compare workers' compensation in Tennessee or Ohio to Kentucky because the laws are written differently.
Right.
So what may be covered in another state or be a liability in another state will not be a liability in the state of Kentucky
But if,
until there's case law. And until there's case law, we can speculate all day on what could happen as from a liability aspect.
but you also, and if another state has tried it and another state has done it, we're opening this up. It is a possibility. It is also a possibility that they go to federal court, and there's federal case law. So you've got to look at all the different aspects. That's what I want to sit here and I want to be sound in my judgment to make sure that everyone sitting up here.
And I'm not arguing your point. I'm just saying at this point in time, there is no case law in the state of Kentucky that I'm aware of. And KLC and KCO have not spoken out against the program, and they didn't speak out against the legislation. It was as it was going through the process, because that liability would fall back on KCO and KLC.
Exactly.
So
And
that's all I wanted to let you know.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to get
Right.
with in my mind to make sure that there is no liability against the county or against the city as well.
Would there not be, though, maybe a liability against the city if we didn't pass it and a police officer got stuck with a dirty needle because we didn't have a program like that? I mean, is that a possibility?
You can
I
have
think, we're doing hypotheticals.
Right.
Yeah,
Say something real quick. Now, hush. Everybody has deep-seated emotion and experience and different values and different thought processes about this. Some of you will be able to get past it, and some of you won't, okay? And I discovered this. You know, I sat there with 6 other magistrates, and I listened to folks, what if, and what if, and what if, and what if this thing to death, okay? And we can do that. And you can, what if a pregnant woman walks in? A pregnant woman's gonna do heroin anyway, whether she gets a syringe from us or somewhere else, okay? You can what if that to death, okay? What if somebody ODs with one of these syringes? You can what if that to death. What if they didn't have one of these and they OD'd? Would it make a difference? So you can what if, and you can throw up snowballs on this all day, okay? You as individuals have to get past this and determine, is this best for the community? Is this best for the community health of Scott County and Georgetown? And when you do this, consider Stamping Ground in Sadieville as well. You have to get past that. You can what if this thing and throw spitwads at it all day. I would encourage you to read the ordinance that the fiscal court passed and that you're being asked to adopt, and you'll find that many of your questions are already answered. Now sit down and you can talk.
You're doing a fine job.
Connie, did you
The
hear a
only
question?
thing yes, thank you. The only thing I wanted to address was the fact of, you know, when people do come in there, you're establishing relationship and a trust issue, which they already don't have that. And having law enforcement around and them thinking and knowing that, you know, their dealers are going to be sought after, you're setting the exchange program up to fall. But the other thing I want to address is our own police department has advocacy where people can walk in there and say, I want help, no questions asked, and they help them, and they send them to treatment centers. That's why we hired the advocate. Is that not a correct statement, Chief Fossey? Okay. So, you know, to me, this is just another tool in our tool belt to move forward to help our community not spread disease and hopefully educate to where they'll want to get help.
Question real quick. If you have anybody come in and they're a drug addict and they need help, do you send them someplace? Do you hook them up with a place, or?
So
because that is probably one of the most important things on the program. If they come in and they've been doing it and they said, I need to get off of this.
Right. So we have those discussions, and I have one syringe exchange coordinator, as you met her. She loves infectious disease. She's right where she needs to be, but she has, when she's not doing syringe exchange, running the program in the health department, she's out in the community building partnerships. Right. And so she has a gamut of resources that, depending on if you think you have an STD, we send them right over to our clinic. If you need to go to the emergency department for something, so it's about education and the relationships. To say that we have treatment centers readily available,
right,
we give them resources. We say, here's a list of the treatment centers, and whether they're available or not is up to them. We don't facilitate that, take
But if
them
they
there, but
ask
we
you-
absolutely.
But, you will give them directions where to go and to help them out.
Mhm.
The issue I have with the whole thing is that as elected official, we're here to serve and protect this community. This program, it took me, a year and a half, 2 years to really buy into it, because we're not going to stop them from using drugs. The purpose of this program is stop them from spreading diseases to other people that uses the same needle. Correct?
Part of their rights and responsibilities that they're educated on when they come in, and I'm sure Amber went through this with you, is to be a participant in our program, you are committing to also picking up syringes and putting them in the sharps container that we give you. So there is an effort there as well for them to do their part in cleaning up the needles that are on the streets or in parks.
Well, I do know that we've had a couple public works employees in the past few years that got stuck by needles. Bill Parker says that the Park and Rec picks them up off their parking lot all the time. I know they're found down at the fairgrounds, where we have the fairgrounds. It's just like, if you look for them, you can find them. The worst part about it, a 2-year-old or 3-year-old child playing on a swing doesn't understand that. That's my concern. Is it's a health issue, and if I can do anything to protect, I think that's what our responsibility is serve and protect this community. And don't get me, drugs are just something that was invented to destroy lives, and that's what it does. It destroys life. One of my best friend's daughter died here out there on going towards Oxford, 20 years old, OD. Her boyfriend left her there, needle in her hand. She died, and they were using the same needle.
Other questions from the council for Dr. Miller?
Yes, I have, probably go ahead.
Well, you go ahead.
I just have some, since we first talked about this here, so which was about a month ago, I've been every night trying to read other programs, what they're doing, good, bad, indifferent, that kind of stuff. I came to visit, and actually I misled her when I came in, because I came in and I asked for needles. The only thing she made a comment, she said, "Are you here for diabetic needles?" Or actually, not thinking, okay, I'm big and I'm overweight, so you think it's diabetic.
You actually, we knew, because you actually don't fit the criteria.
That's what she said, but then she said, I said that, and then she made the comment, my husband made the comment, he said, you'll never get past the front door. And then she made the comment, though, that they don't judge, because it's amazing what steps of life and walks of life would come through the door. So as I started asking her about the program, she knew for sure that I wasn't there to participate in the program, which is one thing I would like to see changed on, and you can tell me whether it could or not, on that. If someone like me, let's say I was serious about it and had never experienced drug abuse, whatever, before, but I wanted to, and I thought, well, if I'm going to start into the world of drugs, I'm going to go there and get my needles and get started, because I'm going to have clean needles. Would I do that? Could I do that? If I've never participated? I know you all asked questions, because I asked her what was some of the questions, and some of the questions that she did go over, a few of them with me, and I know, right, which I wouldn't pass the questionnaire, but somebody else that may want it for the first time would pass that questionnaire. So would you give that person, regardless whether they've ever shot up before or not, and they're going into the world of drugs for the first time?
Well, I can't imagine that happening.
That doesn't matter, the imagination.
If that were to happen, well, I can tell you that at every turn, we try to intercept their cycle of life.
Okay.
At every turn. So if you come in and you say, I'm just having a bad life and I want to do drugs and I want to start right now, we would talk about that. That it wouldn't be, here's your 40 syringes, hit the street.
If that person said, I'm in a bad spot, yes, you would talk to her.
We would probably offer her a counseling session
But
with a certified drug and alcohol counselor that's
on the spot, on the staff.
well, no, that's not on our staff, no. But
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with what you were talking about, going to get someone to get help, because you talked to me about that too, getting help. And you said that you don't have anybody to seek. All you're giving out is, here's the resource, here's where to go, this kind of stuff. So if that person's in with you and they're in the need and they're thinking, okay, I'm in a trusted spot that I can be trusted, I can trust these people, I can talk to these people. Yet once they're out the door, the world hits them square in the face again. They may turn the opposite direction, never get the need that they help, because you can't really connect them to it. But that's beside the point. One of the things I want to say, since, like I said, I started out saying that I have researched this since and read articles, dreamed about needles and everything else. But one of the areas I started in was on the West Coast, because they've been doing it the longest. So, but this is what I have a fear for our area, because we are really new into this because of the overdoses that is happening here. But it started out on the West Coast basically because of the AIDS that started out there. So I took the state of Washington, because there's a lot of information out there on the state of Washington. And in the state of Washington, they've gone from what that program out there started as dead on what we're talking about today. It's harm reduction, reduce HIV was the main thing. Hepatitis C came along later, and drugs was not involved. The addict part of it was not involved. Well, now it's changed to the point after, like the mayor says, 20 plus years. Now they have slot machines that you can go to, and you basically can just get the needles right out of a slot machine when you need them. They have rolling vans that go into areas that now that area is so overtaken by drugs and by homeless and all the negatives that you can think of. It has been taken over by that. They also have, this is the thing, the HIV there has actually decreased in Washington State since the beginning of that. The hepatitis C has increased. Okay, so, but the drug use has also increased, which makes that hepatitis C correlation there has increased as well. But their needle exchange program has been around for 20 years. So the needle exchange program is not getting a hold of to keep that down if the statistics work out. It's been there for 90 years, the needle exchange. All it seems like it is doing is creating more users, and if you have more users, then you have more spread of drugs and disease by having more users. So, and then the last thing that they're doing now, when they give you out the paraphernalia, they give you out everything, because you're just giving out needles, right? That's it.
Condoms.
And but they're giving out needles, condoms, the cotton swabs, the
Well, we give a cotton swab and a Band-Aid.
do you give the band that goes around the arm?
No.
Do you give the little cup that heats
The
up
cookers.
the stuff?
No, but you can make a cooker out of a Coke can.
Yes,
I mean,
yes. And the reason they give out all this stuff, I went further to research why, is because of the decrease in bacteria if they have all clean stuff when they start. So are we going to get to the point that we're going to give out everything because that's a harm reduction except for the drug itself? Is that where we're going?
I understand that mindset. So do you all understand that we're here because we got a hold of the pill mill? So we got a hold of pills, and we implemented Casper and stopped the I-75 train from Florida to Kentucky. And what happened as an unintended consequence, and I've talked to Hal Rogers and Van Ingram from Operation Unite, what's happened is this is an unintended consequence, heroin, meth, all of that. So that's why we're here. I would say that Washington's rates, Hep C is not increasing. I'm saying that I would say that they are now testing. We're going to see an increase in our rates too. Our rates are going to skyrocket, but it's not because we don't have it. It's because we don't have a testing site for it.
Okay, so the government program shut the pills. We became the interstate transportation for the pills, but the government program shut the pills down has now caused the hepatitis C to skyrocket even worse than what it was. Which also the hepatitis C doesn't, yes, drug users are a high percentage of it, and Amber told me about because they use the drugs, what a quicker response you see hepatitis C developing in their body. But when we went on vacation in Atlanta Airport, I fell over. There was a big sign the size of that wall that said if you were born between this age and this age, make sure you get tested for hepatitis C. But I'm not taking it too serious because I'm in that age, and I'm not thinking too much about it. Then I talked to Amber. Then she told me that if you were 1992 or 1994 and you ever went to the dentist, you need to be tested for hepatitis C. And I'm like, oh, holy crap. I now have hepatitis C is what I'm thinking. So here's the problem. You kind of said it earlier. It shouldn't be tested. You all shouldn't be having the burden of this responsibility. It should be every doctor in this community, when you go to the doctor, automatically saying, you need to be tested for hepatitis C because it's more in the baby boomers, which fall into that. It's more in the baby boomers is where it's really starting to show its head up as well. So everybody in the community does need to be tested. I'll agree with you.
It's about education.
It is about education.
But we handle it because we handle communicable diseases. We have a full-page list of communicable TB, a ton of STDs. We handle, that's why this is in public health's lane.
But
Had the legislation not tied it to the body of the city and the county, we would have opened 3 years ago.
And why did they? Because in some other states, like back to Washington, they're now handing out crack pipes because they think it will, the pipes actually will transmit less disease than needles. So they're handing out those now so you can take your heroin through that. And they're offering places that you can go and you shoot up and you're under supervisory of, so you're not going to overdose. So
the law that was passed is pretty restrictive, and it also requires the framework that we have that was in your all's first packet. The framework that we have is very specific about what we do. I can't go and change and say we're going to start handing out cookers or that's not part of what we do. We are worried about this from a communicable disease standpoint. So we will continue to hand out exactly what we put in the framework. It would require me coming back to both the county and the city to change it.
How are you going to handle it at your office? Like, is it going to be like in Cynthiana, you had that one day, and the day that I was there, I think there was about 17, 18 people that came, and I think you all say you have in your program 77 people that are there?
We had 77
participants?
through 2018. We actually have over 100 participants total since since the inception of this program.
Okay, so that day there was about 20 that came, and you know, you could see that they got their exchanges and stuff and left. So how many days a week will you be open, and when will they be here?
That's going to have to be something that evolves as we go. We will start a half a day a week like we do in Harrison County. Public health resources are really tight, and so it's going to take some crafting on my part to. Amber will also be the syringe exchange coordinator over here.
Okay. And she said about 4%, or your statistics say there's about 4% of Scott Countyans that come over there, which is not very
We
many
get
people.
calls weekly at our health department asking, do we have a syringe exchange program? I fully expect that it.
So you think those 4% that's there will pull back over and come into Scott County?
I would say if they live here, there would be no reason for them to go to Harrison.
Okay, one of the other things I saw, which tell to the council doing the research, that there are a few cities now that are pulling out. Something is going on, and I couldn't find enough information, but in Philadelphia, they are starting to have a change of heart on what they have set up. And in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, Madison, Indiana, those are there's two towns in Indiana now that have pulled back out or pulling out of the needle exchange program. And then, but the biggest one that I thought was interesting is Charleston, West Virginia, because they really parallel Scott County, Georgetown in so many ways, because their population is 48,000. Our county is about 50,000. In the beginning, they had a mayor that was extremely supportive of it. He himself was a recovering alcoholic, so he was supportive of it because he understood the addiction side of things. And so, but after the program had been up for 2 years, they said that they had approximately 400 people enrolled in the program that gathered in 2 years. So Scott County will probably have 400 people probably in the program. If you're saying you have 100 there, their population is the size of ours and similar in nature to what we are, I don't doubt that we will have 400 people in the program. And the mayor says the reason for wanting to stop the program is the increased drug paraphernalia discharge. And even if they get on board, if you have 400, happen to have 400 participants, they can come the first time, bring nothing back, second time, bring nothing back, third time, only have to bring back 20, that's 100 needles, 100 times 400, that's 4,000 needles that's going to be unaccountable, that's going to be out on the street somewhere. He quotes the rising crime, he quotes new influence of people in that community using drugs, which they don't have to be from Scott County to participate in the program, do they? Okay. And the negative impact on the economy there, because it was downtown, very similar to what ours is downtown, it had a very negative impact on the economy there, and they're struggling with their economy. That's one place they are different than us. And then the fifth thing is they too said what you just said, that they did not have the money to have enough people there to help the citizens that were coming to need the help. And they said the program was basically, and if you have 400 people, let's say you have 400 people coming, let's say 400 people come in one day, you're not going to have time to sit there and talk to them other than giving them the needles and taking the needles, and that's all you're going to have time to. So that will put a burden on the program early on that you won't be able to give the information you need. Another city that's in Washington, same size that we are, they too, now they have changed now the health department and maybe their rules set up, but they too, that was one of their reasons, is they couldn't help the people that were coming.
So I can tell you that this program evolves with time. In 2016, we had 10 people come in Harrison County. We now have over 100. We have to adjust to the change, and we will make every effort to do that. There's money in the president's budget that's not to us yet that I have every reason to believe it's coming to Kentucky. We will use that and capitalize as much as we can on that. We will do the best that we can.
And if it becomes an exchange that you no longer have time to even sit and talk to people, because Amber was very kind to sit and talk to me, and she gave up two hours of her time to sit and talk with me. But the people that came in went in between my time, she wasn't with them, but for five minutes or so that she was with them. And I told her, take your time, do what you need to do to help the people that's coming. So
the reality is that there are many people that come in our program that know exactly what they want, and they are not ready. They are regulars. and they come in and they know exactly what they want, and Amber will ask them questions related to their intake assessment, and that's a relationship that they have. So you may have seen I don't know who you saw, but, you know, it's not every time that somebody comes in there that we spend 30 minutes with them. The average time spent with the SEP participant is less than 15 minutes.
I believe
if
that.
you average out every visit.
Yeah, I believe that. And why do you take the zip code?
We track zip code for,
Well, why
obviously.
do you take the residents?
No.
I think that's what that says. Does it not say that?
the county, take their zip code,
You take their zip
ask their
code.
first two letters of their first name, it makes up their unique identifier.
I'll find it somewhere and see what I read, but it sounded like you took their residence, and I was like, is the residence not your address? And if your address is, doesn't that make you?
No, we take birth year, birth month, last four of your social.
Okay, I'll look to see if I found it, see if I found that in this.
But there's also literature that shows that there's actually, with SEP programs, there's actually decreased crime as well. So you can probably find literature on both sides
Yeah,
of that. I can tell you that I've looked at some law enforcement data, and crime has increased in the last 3 years here in terms of drug paraphernalia charges. So to say that, if it continues to increase, I don't know that you can correlate that with an SEP program either.
I bet you can.
It was the zip code of the residence is what it is.
Zip code of the resident, is that what it is?
One question, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Who would have thought 30 years ago, until y'all would have moved in and we boomed community-wise, and so many different people moved in this community, that we're with a situation that we've got to do something about. So, people's coming in throughout the state, nation.
We have the highest hepatitis A rates, hepatitis C rates.
And they might
We
have had
two
that before
major
they got
interstate
here. You don't
transmitters.
know. But we're not small Georgetown no more. We have got to stand up and do what's best for this community as a whole, I think, personally.
And we
it's
can,
not.
we can continue. There's not an undecided vote around this table, folks. You can keep asking questions, but I'm not sure what the purpose is. Yes, sir, Martin.
I've tried to sit here and listen to every question that's being asked with an open mind. And I think back, I just started my 9th year on the city council. And in my personal opinion, this is by far the most controversial item that I've had to deal with, without a doubt. Others might disagree, but to me, it's the most controversial issue that I've had, that I'm going to have to vote on. And in a perfect world, we're not talking about this.
Well, you saw it.
We're not. We're not in a perfect world.
Nope.
Since this was first brought to us about 30 days ago, 2 meetings ago, you and I have had at least 6 or 7 conversations via the telephone, and I've spent several hours with you firsthand at the Harrison County Health Department, watching this program in action. And it was an eye-opener. It was. And as I try to listen and learn without always talking, listen, learn, and just be observant. I've tried to think of this as a father of 2 kids. I've tried to think of this as a brother, a son, a husband, a friend. It's been an eye-opener. And there are people out there that unfortunately get addicted for all the wrong reasons. And it is unfortunate.
Let me quote that statistic too. Do you know 70% of people who are on heroin started with a prescription from their medical provider?
That's sad.
People tend to think that heroin users look like something or just want to party. I've heard that time and time again. That is not where we are. You saw, you were there.
I did. And, again, I don't have all the answers. I don't. But in a perfect world, we're not dealing with this. But we're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. And if you've already made up your mind and you're going to vote against it, that's your decision. You know, we can be respectful if we disagree. That's part of this
How we are.
discussion. Yeah. I sit here and think of some of the statistics that you just presented, and I think back, I know there's been several questions tonight of what's the cost, or how are we going to measure this? If we do nothing, the people in Scott County, and there's a significant amount of people that were on that chart in 2018 with HIV and Hep C. And there's a cost associated with that treatment. So if we do nothing, it costs us as taxpayers. If we do something, you know, the goal should be, which I know it is the goal, is that our goal is to, you know, reduce with the intent of eliminating HIV and Hep C, which is a cost. Yeah. I started out adamantly opposed to this program, adamantly opposed when this first got brought up to the county government less than a year ago, maybe a year ago, 2.5 years ago, because I thought it was,
Here you sit.
I was brought up to believe that this was wrong. And my position has evolved
I appreciate
to
that.
where I'm trying to be open-minded all the way till we get to our next vote, or to get to the vote at our next council meeting. But again, the program is to reduce the exposure and ultimately eliminate HIV and Hep C. And as our population in Scott County continues to grow, and we've heard, you know, the judge at the State of the County address, pardon me if I get these numbers wrong, but in 11 more years, our population is going to grow by at least another 13 to 15,000 people. In 20 years, it's going to grow by an additional 20 to 25,000, maybe
That's
more.
projection.
By 40, we'll get to 99,000 according to the.
Yeah. So if we don't do anything, this, what I consider to be a problem, is only going to get worse as the population continues to grow.
Mark, the other piece of data I shared was that through, I forget the exact date, but somewhere early in February, Brandon at Rimland shared with me that we've already had 9 ODs. And last year we had 15 total. I don't have the sheet in front of me, it was like 12. You know, we're already at 9.
3 months in.
3 months in. And I came to listen, I'm interrupting you, but I would just ask the city council to Google Scott County, Indiana. And it's ironic that it's Scott County, Indiana, because right across the river, a huge outbreak because of HIV, because of IV drug use. Over 200 people documented contracting it, and study after study, CDC quotes that if there had been a syringe exchange program, the rate of that would have been cut drastically. And I don't want us to become like Scott County, Indiana. And there's no magic wand. I just came to listen, but that's what I would ask city council to consider. Crystal and everybody else talked about it, but Google Scott County, Indiana, and help that make your decision the way you vote.
Mayor, I got one more comment and one question. Again, the comment is if we, at the end of the day, when we take a vote at our next council meeting, if we disagree, that's okay. It is okay. That's part of this process, is try to learn and make the best educated decision that we can make as city council members for the benefit of our constituents and this community as a whole. And that's okay if we disagree, it is. The question I have is, at the present time, just for clarification purposes, for me, if I'm a drug user and I'm trying to get needles, are there places in Scott County at the present time, whether it's ordering via the internet or establishments here in this community, where I can get needles at the present time?
Yeah, you can order on Amazon.
Okay, thank you.
Go to Walmart and pick them up 100 at a time.
Yeah, there was a time when they were being restricted,
Pay with them.
and for whatever reason, that I do want to invite you between now, if you've not been to our syringe exchange program, I hope you will come. Please reach out to me if you're coming, because we're a one-man show there, and it really disrupts our participants to try and educate an elected official on it as well as serve our participants. So we're an open book. We're happy to share whatever. You're not going to find anything illegal that we're doing. It's the program, the framework is there. So if you want to come, I highly encourage you to. I'll be happy to show you around.
And Crystal, I understand the premise behind the program, and I think it's very admirable to go after the disease part of it, but just the law enforcement side of me thinks that they're, I know that Chief Bossy, Chief Swanigan, and their men do a great job. I was a part of it. I think they're still continuing to do great things, but they're trying to hold back the Atlantic Ocean with a sponge, and it is a bad problem. That was where my point about bringing up more the enforcement part of give them some more people to help. And I know it's a budget thing, and we're fixing to go into, that's a whole different thing, but, law enforcement needs more people to help battle this problem. Yeah, so.
Well, also know that we've already talked about partnering up with the Angel program.
Yeah, and that's
we are
another
about
fabulous
community
program.
partnerships because it is a holistic view. We really try to take that. Although public health is concerned about the disease, we really try to do the other portions as well. That's just not our total focus. We don't have the resources to put people in treatment.
I'd like to echo what Todd said, because that's kind of my background on it. I mean, I know trying to stop the spread of disease and harm reduction, I mean, it's extremely, admirable. But a lot of it to me is the law enforcement and that, and kind of too, I don't know if you know this, but there's cities and then there's the FBI statistics where they should be staffed. And I think ours is like 20 under of how many police we should have. And kind of from my background and law enforcement and just what I've studied, we're on two major highways, interstates, 64 and 75.
It's a very transient population.
It is.
This
And
activity.
in terms of, two people come for needles, but also, just kind of the background that I know about, it is like you said, you're trying to stop the Atlantic Ocean with a sponge. And, if we end up having to hire more police, our budget is so stretched that, it's like giving $5,000 to a nonprofit a lot of times.
Because our program is going to increase crime, or what's the correlation there?
Well, we're wondering if it is going to increase crime because some places it has.
Well, it's increased here the last 3 years.
Well, it's increased here because we're the fastest growing city of the state and we're on two interstates.
I would say it's going to continue
So-
whether this program goes or not.
Well, but it could add more to it. And if we add more to it, are we going to have to raise taxes to hire more police
I
to
can
pay
provide
for
you
the
literature
program?
that shows that actually doesn't happen.
Well, I've done my research. It's like Karen said, every night I'm online looking at this. I have no misconceptions. I have looked through everything on it, and I found pros and cons both ways. So, you can find it. If you have an argument, you can find anything to substantiate it, or any facts to substantiate any argument that you're trying to do. So I understand that. But I'm just explaining my thoughts and my feelings behind it. Because unfortunately, if you're buying a car or buying a house or passing legislation, you do have to focus on what ifs, because you cannot make a decision and not have it affect other things.
So I would say come and see our needle exchange for yourself, and that might.
When are you over there this week?
Thursdays.
Thursday from 12 to 4:30.
I'll be there at 12 o'clock.
Good.
Okay, I'll meet you there.
Good. Thank you.
Anybody else want to come?
Skip Kiwanis class, no worries.
I'll say one more thing, and then I'll. As Mark said, it's pretty obvious as the panel.
Yeah,
as to
it's pretty
who-
obvious,
Who is in
yeah.
favor and who is against it. But what this reminds me of so much is Planned Parenthood. In the 70s, they got funding for Planned Parenthood, and it started out the same thing as harm reduction to help women, to help women's needs, to help women's health. And what it turned into was Planned Parenthood has killed 7.6 million babies.
Yep.
What I see happening with this, and I hope that I am incorrect when I say this, but what I see happening with this, our statistics is that there's 70,000 overdose as the judge said. We're talking about overdose, but you are not talking about, this program is not talking about overdoses. And
We track overdoses. We are very
track
connected
it,
to our
but
law
you
enforcement,
still-
but no, we do not respond to
You can't-
overdoses.
That's
This
right.
is about the
That's right.
disease.
And that's the way the program is set up, and that's the problem. The program is set up that way, and it's
normalizing drug use. Instead of focusing on how many deaths happen because of drug use, let's pull something back on drug use. Because if you look at the HIV, yes, it's costing. But 16,000 people a year, that's the statistic, the CDC statistic, die of HIV. And hepatitis C is more. It's like 16,000 is what the last ones I could get a hold of in 2016. Those are important statistics. But when you compare it against the 70,000 that are dying of drug overdose, it looks like we've got the cart behind the horse. If we took care and was able to have a program that reduced the 70,000 deaths, it would in turn reduce the HIV deaths as well as having and living with hepatitis C.
So I'll ask that you, when you vote for this, please don't vote because you need another program. Think about the purpose of this program, and if you have to vote no on this program, then what's the alternative solution?
There has
To
to be
stop
an
the
alternative
spread of
solution.
this.
And I'll tell you an alternative solution.
Then you come with it and let's talk.
Hepatitis C, and I don't have the power to do this, but Amber has helped enlighten me on this, is that needs to start in the doctor's office. That needs to start at the hospital.
We need a syringe exchange program, so we have a coordinator working in this county that can do
It
that.
doesn't have, hepatitis C comes with people that don't necessarily have to have drug overdose to have hepatitis C, and I think that's part of the statistic we're missing here. Yes, that increases it through that population that uses it, but there's a lot of people now affected with hepatitis C that need to get tested. So if anything else, I am advocating with you, get tested for it.
So it's outreach, and you don't have to be using drugs to come and get tested and through our needle exchange. If you want to come in there and you should have asked her the other day, she would have gladly.
I would have gotten it.
It's a public health service. You don't have to use drugs to get tested.
I'll come back.
Karen, you mentioned, what was it, so many thousands? Talk about the lady.
Drug overdose?
No, well, I was going to say, in the last, since Roe versus Wade, there have been 66 million babies.
But Planned Parenthood itself is responsible for 7.6 million. A program that started out good is harm reduction.
Just, if we could stay
We
on
could throw numbers
topic,
out.
if we could stay partway on topic, Planned Parenthood does a whole lot more than what you're talking about.
Right.
It deals with women's health issues. Can we just stay on track enough to talk about one program at a time and not make misstatements about other programs to smear it?
I am not smearing Planned Parenthood.
It is not the topic for tonight. We can go over to Harrison County and go undercover, but I hope that if you go to Harrison County, you'll just identify yourself and not go undercover.
Mayor, if I may say, it is my opinion that this program will, over years and time, end up going the wrong direction.
Yes,
Just
ma'am,
what I think.
you've made that clear, and
And
you'll
I-
get an opportunity to vote that way in 2 weeks. Can we have first reading of the ordinance? Please.
An ordinance consenting to the operation of a syringe exchange program in Georgetown, Kentucky. Summary. Consents to Wedco, Scott County operating a syringe exchange program in the city of Georgetown. Provides basic guidelines for enrollment in the program, operation of the program, reporting to the council, and referrals to drug treatment facilities. Provides power of revocation and provides for severability, repeal of inconsistent ordinances, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or www.georgetownky.gov. Introduced and publicly read for the first time March 25th, 2019.
Thank you. That will constitute first reading. Second reading will occur in 2 weeks. Item C on your agenda is first reading of Great Crossing School annexation. The sponsors are Tammy Lesby Mitchell and Mark Showalter.
An ordinance annexing into the city of Georgetown certain real property containing 90.1039 acres located at or around US 460 and Betsy Way in Scott County, Kentucky. Summary. 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owners in accordance with KRS 81A.412, 90.1039 acres of property located at or around US 460 and Betsy Way in Scott County, Kentucky. 2. Provides for an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time March 25th, 2019.
Thank you. That will be first reading. We'll have second reading at our next meeting. Item G on the agenda is first reading of the Creekside School annexation.
An ordinance annexing the city of Georgetown certain real property containing approximately 13.92 acres located at or around the intersection of McClellan Circle and East Main Extension in Scott County, Kentucky. Summary 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owners in accordance with KRS 81A.412, approximately 13.92 acres of property located at or around the intersection of McClellan Circle and East Main Extension in Scott County, Kentucky. 2. Provides for an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the Georgetown City Clerk's Office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time March 25th, 2019.
Thank you. As before, we'll have second reading at our next meeting of that school annexation.
An updated version of the noise ordinance.
Okay.
I'm gonna pass that out.
Good. Item E is first reading of an amendment to our noise ordinance. It's been updated, I believe. So Devin's got a copy for us.
David is still the sponsor. He just got left out.
Ordinance is very straightforward. It comes after a number of requests. It simply changes our noise ordinance from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock on weekends. So that commercial establishments can have a band or something of that type. The addition that Devin just handed out, the intention when it was drafted was to be weekends and major holidays. I think it got drafted without the major holidays.
I do have one question about this, and because I'm a part of and I know Marvin is too, you know, the events at the county park.
Yeah.
We have, usually when we have those events, we have till midnight and they have to shut off. Is that changing
You
this
all
time?
still do, because if it's on government property, and that is government property, then the government sets the hours.
Okay,
This has to do with commercial establishments.
Okay, I
We
just
won't
wanted to
mess
make
with you
sure.
there.
There's actually language in there making that clarification.
Okay, I read it and I was like, well, it says it's okay, but then wait a minute, no, but we're clear on that, I'm good, so.
An ordinance amending Georgetown Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9, Article 2 regarding noise nuisances. Summary. 1. Amends Georgetown Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9, Article 2, Section 9-23 to provide exemptions for events held on government-owned property and non-residential districts from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays and holidays. 2. Provides for an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time March 25th, 2019.
Thank you. That'll be first reading, and hopefully that'll be a routine second reading at the next meeting. Unless we have a council chambers full of folks, and then we'll deal with that at the time. Let's see, Eddie Hightower is not here this evening. He had some dental work done today. Oh, I did forget F, didn't I? Thank you. Item F under city attorney. Since Devin is the city attorney, she pointed that out to me. A municipal order approving 4 change orders for our radio project, and they're all detailed in there.
Is that still about within our budget or a little less, isn't it? Or?
It's still within our budget today, Marvin. It leads, these 4 change orders leave us with $178,000 in our contingency fund. But after the executive session, we're going to ask you to spend $200,000 of that $178,000. If you get how that math works.
I've got it.
But these are necessary change orders that we need to go forward.
You need a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
And seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now, Eddie Hightower went to the dentist this afternoon, asked to be excused from this evening. This is, again, a routine municipal order approving dedication of streets and Ward Hall estates.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Police Department has a municipal order approving the purchase of night vision monoculars.
Make a motion for that. I know how important those are.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I learned something today that night vision binoculars are illegal. So they make monoculars that look through one eye, but then combine the image. It's some regulation. I don't know. But that's why we're buying monoculars instead of binoculars.
Because binoculars, you're a stalker.
That may be it, night vision stalker.
I think it says that.
Oh, Robert,
Gotcha.
It's good to hear a chuckle.
I know that.
Okay.
I laugh
Do we
all the
have the
time.
language? We're ready for item
All right.
12 now.
Mayor, I move to enter executive session pursuant to KRS 61-810 1B to deliberate future sale or acquisition of real estate.
I found
Real
your
property.
information.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Steve, we do anticipate taking action.
Before you leave, real quick, I'll take my M&M dinner.
You got M&M's?
Chris.
Stop it.
I can't make it this
say you
week,
didn't
but I'm gonna
share.
try next week.
I'm sorry.
You'd stop at,
Rough.
what is that?
Steve, did you finish M&M's? No.
I'm gonna pass. I'm being
Jim Galloway's got
good.
a,
I had
you
a
come back
Hershey
down
bar
about
last week.
3 curves on 75.
Rowdy in here real fast.
I did. Everybody's ready to go.
Bob Davis Farm.
Yeah, Steve, while in executive session, of course, we took no action. Connie has made an executive to resume regular session, and Karen, did you second that?
Yes.
All in favor, or wait, I'll let my clerk catch up.
I did. I'm done.
You're done?
I got it.
You're there. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are in regular session again. We have 2 municipal orders. I guess, we take them separate? City Attorney, since we're buying property. Okay, let's take the first one is the order approving the purchase of land on Frogtown Road and the total amount of $234,780.
I make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Steve, we're buying land to locate a radio tower for our new 911 system. Is what we're doing here.
Mayor, I do have one question before we move forward.
Yeah.
Is the county gonna go in halves with us on that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
The entire project is city county.
Okay.
So even the revenue,
Okay.
unfortunately, on the radio tower that we put up. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The second item of business that we discussed in executive session was to approve purchase of land on East Main Street and the total amount of $50,000. And Steve, this is the rear of the property at 130 East Main Street.
Mayor, I'll make a motion for approval.
I'll second
I'm
that,
passionate
Mayor.
about this project.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And we will enter into those contracts. Oh, that's my copy. Thank you. And council comments. Let's see. Todd, can we start down on your end?
Absolutely. Just a couple things. Currently, and I do not know what the score is, but Georgetown College men are playing in the Fab Four in Kansas City against William Carey of Mississippi. The next game will be Carroll, Montana versus Lewis Clark State of Idaho. Georgetown College wins tonight. They're in the national championship game tomorrow night at, wait a minute, I have an update.
Well, Council, is it 46-26 Georgetown?
Like they might win.
I think we might be in good shape.
I think we may be.
As long as we're not playing Duke.
So it's very possible that they'll be playing tomorrow night.
Looks like.
Cool.
I do know Galvin's is having it broadcast live down there right now. The Student Life Department is actually broadcasting it live in the CAF. So I would say I will be working late tomorrow night. So
You'll be working late tomorrow, and I think there's a difference. Galvin's has beer and the college does not, right?
Well, not that you could see.
Mark, no, it is a dry college. We do not have that over there. That's all I've got for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Todd. Holly?
I'm good.
Good.
Barbara? Davis?
I'm good.
Connie? Karen?
Now, Mayor, don't you think I said enough tonight, so I'm good?
Somebody pray.
Mark?
Hallelujah.
Tammy?
I just wanted to bring up one thing that I was curious how to handle. We get these messages that come to all county, or all council members. And we got one from this Leanne Vaughn this week. How do you all usually answer those? Because I don't want to ignore
Is
people
Miss
who
Vaughn-
send them. This is the one about the litter.
The litter.
Out,
Litter on
out Oxford Drive.
Yeah.
Well,
If you could forward it to us. I'm not sure
Y'all didn't get
did
it?
we get
Maybe y'all didn't get it.
I got it.
Leanne Vaughn.
I think I replied
I
back
wrote
to
her
her
back. I just write them back.
without copying everybody on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
and what do you, I wrote back to her and said, thank you for bringing it to our attention. And
Mention.
that I would bring it up at the council meeting. But then, I mean, seriously, what happens? Because I don't want to tell somebody that and then it
Well,
doesn't happen.
Typically, we'll get with Public
Yeah, they get
Works
to Public
and ask
Works.
them to police up the area and give us a report back.
So does that automatically happen now that we got this? Or does
Well,
something-
since I'm not aware of it, and I give Robert direction, okay, it may not.
But Robert wouldn't mind if you called him and have him drive out there and look at it. He would have his guys clean it up just like that.
Yeah, a lot of
Okay.
times I'll pass it on to them or, you know,
I'll
make a
tell
call.
Maybe they can get.
Public Works or the jail.
Yeah, the jail.
And
Yeah,
we
jail's
get
doing it.
we get jail crews.
And I do see that you answer, sometimes you answer those complaints, but in this case, I didn't see answers, so I wanted to make sure.
We are in the middle of responding to a citizen who has asked us some very thoughtful questions about recycling and asking why we aren't doing more. And Andrew has responded, I think, in a pretty comprehensive way, citing the collapse of the recyclable market and given links to several articles talking about how cities are struggling right now. She's indicated that she wasn't satisfied with that answer, and I'm going to try and meet with her this week just to talk about what we feel like we can and can't do right now.
But in that email, the lady did say that it was ongoing, that they cleaned up the garbage themselves quite a bit, him and her and their child. So probably the other thing is like continuation of that continually being cleaned.
Yeah,
Look at.
ironically, the day that she sent that email, I was pulling out of that area, because I live in that area, and the jailer had the crew out there picking up trash along the road. But I think her main concern was Oxford Road, so anyway, I just kind of said the same thing the mayor said, so,
I wanted to handle it the right way and
Sure.
didn't want to ignore, so.
yeah.
And,
Endless.
you know, when you get a complaint like that, I don't think you should ever have to shoulder it yourself.
No.
Call me, call Andrew, call Devin, and we'll make sure department head is working with you and you have the answers that you want.
Yeah, and I'll share one more thing that might be relevant, because she's talking about Oxford Road specifically, and Cherry Blossom,
Right.
you know, adjoins or borders that road. Our neighborhood spends $10,000 a year to mow and maintain, you know, that edge of the road that, you know, used to be the state right of way, now it's kind of like the city right of way, and the city's not gonna mow and maintain it to that level, but they do pick up trash, you know, as they're mowing it, so,
Okay.
and that area looks pretty nice.
Good. Well, and I'm glad that you've answered her too, so at least she knows she's not being ignored. That was the point, you know.
Yeah, we find that even if we can't give people the answer they want,
Just to respond.
they're a lot harder to deal with if you don't answer them at all.
I always write people back and just say, thank you for letting us know. I'll
Yeah.
pass it on, you know, because people just want to, I think they need to hear that. They,
wanna
you know,
hear
you're an
from your
elected official. They
representative.
want to hear from you, so
Anything else, Tammy?
that's always the end.
If there's nothing else to come before the council, we will stand adjourned.
Who won? Derby day.
Yeah, trying to-
No.